So we're looking at 1 Timothy chapter 5. 1 Timothy chapter 5, and tonight we're really going to go for it. We're going to do verses 9 through to and including verse 16. Yeah, verse 16. So I shall read that to you. Let not a widow be taken into the number under 80 years old, having been the wife of one man, well reported of for good works, if she have brought up children, if she have lodged strangers, if she have washed the saints' feet, if she has relieved the afflicted, if she have diligently followed every good work. But the younger widows refuse, for when they have begun to wax wanton against Christ, they will marry, having damnation, because they have cast off their first faith. And withal they learn to be idle, wandering about from house to house, and not only idle, but tattlers also, and busybodies, speaking things which they ought not. I will therefore that the younger women marry, bear children, guide the house, give none occasion to the adversary to speak reproachfully. For some are already turned aside after Satan. If any man or woman that believeth have widows, let them relieve them, and let not the church be charged, that it may relieve them that are widows indeed. So again, this is this phrase that Paul keeps using, widows indeed. And we might also, refer to it as widows in need. They're in need indeed. And so again, it's this whole issue of the widows. Who is going to take responsibility for those who have nothing and have no one? And as we saw last week, the church has a responsibility to those who have nothing to look after them. But it does not have a responsibility to those who have family members who could be looking after them. So I'm going to kind of take all these verses together tonight. I'm not going to do my usual kind of verse by verse because it's just I think it doesn't really call for that. But we will be covering the things that have come up in these verses. So we're looking at really the New Testament church in action. That's what I find exciting about 1 Timothy, is you get just these like little snapshots into the life of the church, because obviously it's, we weren't there, and the church that we have now, the sort of your average evangelical Protestant church, it's amazing to me when you actually start to really compare it to the biblical church, how far away we are from this, And I was reading something the other day where the person, the book wasn't the greatest book, to be honest. It was a Christian book that kind of fell into my possession, so I didn't steal it or anything, but I was reading it, but the person made a really good point. He said that a lot of the church today is built not on the New Testament model, but on the Roman Catholic model of the church. That has kind of survived the Reformation and everything. And then I started to kind of ponder, thinking, well, I wonder how much we do as a church is actually from the New Testament church, and how much is of a much later version, a redesigned church. But that's something to think about. So this is fascinating. It seems that there are a number of widows who were maintained at the expense of the church, but then that they would actually, in their turn, take care of younger female members. They would kind of have this prominent position within the church, to do with the care of others. And it said the widows that were 80 years old. So if you can work that out, or the kind of King James language, 60. So they're saying these are widows who are 60, no younger than 60 years old, and the church is going to look after them. because they have no one, and also the presumption was that they probably weren't going to get married at that age. They were probably going to be widows then for the rest of their life, and therefore they needed the church to come around and to look after them. So the church feeds those widows because they don't have anybody to feed them. They don't have any real possessions or anything. But there were this particular group of older widows who would take care, according to John Wesley, of sick women or travelling preachers. So they had this kind of duty, or they chose to do this because, of course, they had that more time. They didn't have a husband to look after, they didn't have children to be looking after, so they freed up their time, and they chose to use their time in these acts of service, I suppose you'd call them, really. And it said that these widows should be well reported of for good works. If she has brought up children, if she has lodged strangers, if she has washed the saints' feet, if she has relieved the afflicted, if she has diligently followed every good work. So this is the character of them, and that's quite a specific group, isn't it? They're widows, they're no younger than 60, they have proved themselves through good works, and therefore, yes, they have a responsibility, or I imagine they volunteered for it. I don't think it was imposed upon them by the church, but because they have this good character, it's almost like a wing of the church, a kind of like, I don't know if it's maybe a deaconess type role, but it's one of caring for those who also can't look after themselves, and particularly guiding the younger women in the things of God. Setting out an example of what it is to be a mature, an elderly woman in Christ. And what's the example? Hard work, diligence, and the things of God. Committing themselves to all those things. And it reminded me of what we read in Luke 2:37. Do you remember Anna, who was a prophetess? That she was, I think, in her 80s or something like that. And it said that she departed not from the temple, but served God with fastings and prayers night and day. So again, it's this commitment, the sort of yielding up of her time to pray for the church, to care for those younger women in the church who are suffering, it's not like the pastor's job really, but there was this group of widows who said, well, we've got the time, we'll go and we'll visit them, and we'll make sure they're okay, we'll if they're afflicted, and we'll pray for them and so on. And to me, this idea that the New Testament church is just full of this compassion and selflessness fits in perfectly with what we looked at some time ago in Acts 2. So if you want to follow me, Acts 2, verse 44 and 45. So 44. And all that believed were together and had all things common. Remember, I used that little mnemonic, ATC. They had all things common, and sold their possessions and goods, and parted them to all men, as every man had need, and they continued daily with one accord, and so on. It details then some of the things that they did. But it's that whole attitude, isn't it? Is one of selflessness. It's one of opening your heart, opening your life, giving up your time to help the other members of the church, preach the gospel. Mark 16:15, feed the hungry, clothe the naked, take in the stranger. Matthew 25:36-40. As I was touching on Sunday, that is the New Testament apostolic model of a church, and that's what the whole church would be doing. That's how they'd be living, and therefore no wonder that the rest of the world was taking notice and saying, "What? Who are these people? Look at the love that they have for one another. It's not a few hugs and a few nice words. they're literally putting their money where their mouth is. They're putting their possessions and demonstrating that love to one another. And those people who are afflicted, or those people who have nothing, the church is saying, well, we'll take care of you. Don't worry, you haven't got a house, you haven't got a husband, don't worry, we'll house you, we'll look after you, we'll feed you, we'll give you clothes that you need, and whatever it is. And so what is special, I think, about the widows that are being mentioned here is the particular blessings that they have, the wisdom that comes with age. These are clearly godly women who have spent their time studying the scriptures, praying. They're close to God, demonstrating love and compassion. Therefore, they have that wisdom that comes with age, and they have the practice of godly disciplines. So this is the character that Paul is showing, and he's also showing that the church is something where people of all ages can get involved in. It's not just a young person's game, and you can't expect anything of so and so. She's she's in her 70s now. Just leave her alone. Everybody was involved. Everybody did what they could do. Not everybody could do the same thing, but here is an opportunity for those older women, and it demonstrates the character of a true Christian woman. But just like we looked at last week, it is now contrasted by Paul with the character of with the opposite of that, if you like. So verse 13, 1 Timothy 5, it is contrasted with those widows who are idle, wandering about from house to house, and not only idle, but tattlers. Tattlers is an interesting word, isn't it? Tattlers is just gossips, really. So basically those who talk about other people, usually in a sort of casual way, usually without all the facts, but spreading gossip for one another. And it's so, I think, in today's church, it's almost like laughed at, isn't it? People say, oh, bit of gossip for you, but in the Bible, it's such a serious sin. It really is labelled as this incredibly serious matter. I mean, just read, Proverbs. Let's have a look, actually. Proverbs 26. I've got down here. Let's see if that was the one I was thinking of. But there is lots in Proverbs all about the sin, because it is a sin of gossip. Let's have a look. Proverbs 26, verse 20. Yes. Oh, I'm in the wrong chapter, that's one. Yes, so it says, where no wood is, there the fire goes out. So where there is no talebearer, the strife ceaseth. As coals are to burning coals and wood to fire, so is a contentious man to kindle strife. The words of a talebearer are as wounds, and they go down into the innermost parts of the belly. So there's lots around that area of Proverbs that deal with those ideas. So this idea that this gossip is starting a fire, it's kindling a fire that's going to hurt somebody, it's going to cause destruction. And it goes on to say they're tattlers or gossips, and they're also busybodies, speaking things which they ought not. Again, busybody is kind of a bit like, I don't know, it's one of those almost like a colloquialism, we sort of say, oh yeah, busybody. The more accurate, I believe, from the Greek, the more accurate word is the word officious. Have you ever heard of that word, officious or officious? I don't even know if I'm saying it right, but officious. To be officious, I'll give you the the dictionary definition. To be officious is to be intrusively, enthusiastically authoritative in offering help or advice, often in trivial matters. So it's coming along and basically not just making a suggestion, but coming into somebody's kind of some trivial matter and speaking with authority, like you're the expert, and that's really what a busybody is. My late father, unfortunately, was extremely officious, to the extent that people would actually stop their conversations as he came up. As if they knew him and he was coming on, they'd actually stop talking, because they know that even if he knows nothing about the subject, within a matter of minutes, possibly seconds, he's going to be saying, you need to do this, you need to do that, and it's like, hey, who asked you? And so this is the character that is the opposite of the godly woman. The godly woman is diligent, she's humble, she's working away, she's helping the afflicted, she's going where the need is. She's looking, where is the need for me to be? Right, I'm there. Where the opposite, these idle women, who are also widows, who are younger widows, they're gossips, they're telling tales, and they're also interfering in other people's business, where their help is not required and is not wanted. And why are these such important issues in the church? Why are these such a big deal? What did it say in verse 15? For some are already turned aside after Satan. I mean, that sounded rather serious, doesn't it? It's not just, oh yeah, a bit of gossip, oh well, yeah, she's a bit of a busybody. These are really important things, and I believe it's because these are the things that are going to destroy the cohesion, the commitment, the sort of the single-mindedness of the church, the unity of the church. And the Bible talks about keeping the unity of the Spirit and the bond of peace. It's something you have to keep, something you have to work at as a church. It doesn't just happen automatically. And even if it did, you still have, even if you're fortunate enough just to meet the right people and kind of click, and yeah, we just got this, we're all thinking the same, we still have an adversary who's going to do everything he can to destroy that and to divide people and to disrupt it and to prevent that coming together of fellowship and so on. And so what happens with these younger widows, they've got this time on their hands, but instead of using it to serve those who are in need, they're actually damaging people's reputation through gossip, because that's what gossip does. Dividing people, they're interfering in other people's business, which is, generally people don't like that. It's going to create strife in the church. And so there has to be a solution to this. And again, what I thought is quite interesting is Paul offers advice to Timothy on how he should deal with these younger women in verse 14. He says, I will therefore that the younger women marry, bear children, guide the house, give none occasion to the adversary to speak reproachfully. So that's a list, isn't it? And do you notice Paul, who's not even at Timothy's church, is saying, right, this is what they're going to do. I mean, can you see how much say the New Testament church has in the lives of those people who are part of it? It's not like, oh well, let them get on with their own lives. It's like, look, if they want to be part of this church, I'm telling them they don't do this, they don't do that, and they do this and they do that. And that's how he's speaking, isn't it? He's like, tell them to do this, Timothy. And if you didn't do it, okay, then don't be part of us then. It was because it was that serious, it was that radical, that to be part of a New Testament church, to be part of, to get to that stage where you're willingly giving up your possessions, things that you own, to other people who haven't got them. You don't do that unless you're all in. You know, you don't do that sort of thing. It's not a kind of, oh well, you know, got this really nice place that I occasionally go to on a Sunday, and this is not a dig at people who, I know people want to come here and because of ill health have struggled to make it. But what I'm saying is, it's not like, yeah, if I've got nothing better to do, I might show up, I might grace you with my presence on Sunday morning. Yes, there's people who are totally committed to one another, you know, totally sold out to one another. They'll give you literally give you the shirt off their back, because this is everything to them. You know, they work hard to preserve what they have, and this is what I get excited about when I read the New Testament church, both excited and dismayed. Is I'm like, well, where is this? I think there are places where this is going down, you know, not just in the UK but around the world. But so many other places where just that wouldn't even be on the radar, you know, considering anything like that. It'd be just like, oh, that's just sounds crazy. You know, who would do that? Well, they did it. That's what the church was. That's what they were like. So, in other words, what Paul is saying is they need to be busy, not busybodies. You know, they need to be busy doing things that are profitable. And then he says, because when they wax wanton, in other words, when their passions draw them away from Christ, they fix their desires on the idea of a husband. Yeah, this is what he means by being turned aside after Satan. It said, what did it say, verse 11? The younger widows refuse, for when they have begun to wax wanton against Christ, they will marry. Now it sounds a bit of a strange thing, this. He's saying to them, let them marry. But he's also saying, yeah, they want to marry. And I think the difference is their desires are such that they turn away from Christ and now they think, I just need a husband. You know, all their hopes are on this kind of perfect man they're going to meet. You know, it's no longer living for Christ. They're like living for meeting, you know, Mr. Right and so on. And so Paul's like saying, right, let them marry, but then let them do these other things. And like I was saying on Sunday, you know, you've got to be so careful that whatever it is doesn't become, you know, something you desire, something you want, doesn't become an idol in your life, doesn't take that place of Christ on the throne, even if it's a good thing like a husband or a wife or your family or, you know, your own business or you know, or even a ministry, a Christian ministry. It cannot take the place of Christ. It cannot take the place of Jesus, and unfortunately sometimes it does. And you know, again, I think of the Church of Ephesus. They're doing all the right things. They were probably looked on by us in the 21st century as quite a hardline church. You know, they don't tolerate this, they don't tolerate that. But hang on, where's your first love? You know, what's happened to that? You've left that, or you've lost that. You know, and so this is, I think what he's saying is, you know, these young women need Timothy's help. You know, and sometimes help is in the form of listening, being compassionate, being understanding, extending grace, talking about the forgiveness of God, and sometimes help is in reproving and saying, no, you must not do that, you must do this instead. And that is, I think, that is the role of leadership, and it only works if the people you're leading want to be led, you know, by you, and if there's that relationship between you and the people, a relationship of trust, just like a husband and wife. You know, a man can't lead his wife unless she's willing to be led, and she's only willing to be led if she trusts her husband to lead her. You know, and so I think it's that relationship of trust. It's there in the early New Testament church, and it is certainly something that, you know, I have tried to cultivate, and I think is the way forward for any church, is to build that relationship between whoever is leading the church, whether it's one person or multiple elders or whatever system of church government you have. You have to have that respect from the people that are like, yeah, I want to be led, I want to be taught, I want to know, and also, you know I can trust you, I know I can put my soul, as it were, in your hands, and that you're going to take care of me. I mean, because that essentially you're a shepherd with a small s. Christ is the shepherd, but shepherding is like that. You know, you're feeding, you're leading, you're looking after. But yeah, that was it really. But just so interesting that everybody's involved in this. You know, even the older women, the older widows, they're kind of like they're like the A-team, aren't they? They're like this kind of crack team of, you know, godly women who have honed their wisdom and their godly practices over years, you know, and they've learned to kind of cope, I suppose, without having husband, without having children around, but that love and compassion that maybe they would have shown to their children and so on, you know, now they are showing it to others. In fact, it says, doesn't it, in verse 10, well reported of for good works, brought up children, lodged strangers, washed the saints' feet, relieved the afflicted, diligently followed every good work. So it's a great, you know, a great image for all of us to aspire to, but particularly if you're an older woman, particularly a widow, you know, yeah, there's still a role for you in the church. You know, you're not sidelined or sit at the back. You know, there's still a very dynamic role for everybody in the church, whatever your age. But you must be of one mind. You must be of one heart, one soul, one spirit, one body, really. In order to do that. And you must guard against this gossip, busybodies. People are going to come in and stir up strife. Again, a bit later on, it will talk about being contentious, being quarrelsome. You know, these are things that have to be purged from the church if the church is going to work as a unit. You know. Okay.